Hi everybody, MichaelBtheGameGenie here, and on today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Arcade1Up OutRun stand-up racing cabinet. So that's right guys, today we're going to be taking a look at OutRun, the first 3/4 scale racing cabinet from Arcade1Up. I'm sorry it took me so long to finally review this cabinet, however I was determined that I was going to get the stand-up version, and unfortunately it was never available in Canada. That is until only a couple of months ago Arcade1Up put it up for direct purchase from their website, and after paying an obscene amount for shipping and then another obscene amount for tax and duty, I now have the stand-up Arcade1Up OutRun in my Genie-cade. So let's take a look at the cabinet and see how Arcade1Up did in their first foray into the racing genre. Arcade1Up officially announced OutRun as their first racing cabinet on November the 4th, 2020. I remember that day vividly, scrambling after hearing the news to make my own video about the cabinet. I was so excited by the prospect of a racer, and I was all in on picking it up. In the announcement video from Arcade1Up, they showed two versions being available with a sit-down bench seat and a stand-up cabinet. With the sit-down racer, I had initial concerns about how that would look in my arcade and would it be comfortable for a big guy like myself to use it. My mind was made up instantly. I was getting the stand-up version. Unfortunately, I then found out the stand-up version was going to be released in limited quantities and not at all available in Canada. I spent the majority of the past year trying to convince Arcade1Up and Canadian retailers to make the stand-up available here, but to no avail. In fact, I was told it was 100% confirmed that OutRun stand-up wouldn't be coming here, and I should start waiting for Arcade1Up's second racer when that becomes available. I'd even briefly purchased the sit-down version after giving up on the stand-up, and despite it being a hit with my kiddo, it just didn't do the job for me, and I ended up selling it. Then out of the blue, a friend on Twitter, Material Defender, gave me a heads up that Arcade1Up made the stand-up OutRun available on their website for direct order, meaning that I could in fact order one to Canada. I was really excited but had a bad experience before with ordering direct, with crazy shipping and duty charges getting these cabs to Canada, but this was the only way, so I said what the hell and placed my order. Around $400 in shipping and duty charges later, and almost a year to the day it was announced, stand-up OutRun Arcade1Up has taken its place in the Genie-cade. The big reason we all buy Arcade1Ups isn't just so we can play the games, but to recreate the original arcade cabinet, and they have done such a good job of it here. Well, recreating the stand-up version, because that is the shape of the cabinet and included side art, which was another reason I leaned so heavily towards grabbing that version. First off, let's talk about the form factor, and once again, Arcade1Up have literally broke the mold by not doing the traditional swan design and actually recreating the shape of the original stand-up cabinet in 3/4 scale, and it looks great. It's so refreshing to see all these different shapes when looking down the aisle in my arcade, and it does a lot to create the illusion of a real arcade. The side art is iconic. I mean, it's nothing special, but it is iconic and looks pretty great here, especially displayed in the correct form factor. One thing to note, of course, is the cabinet is devoid of that familiar Sega branding, so it loses some of its arcade authenticity. It's surreal to think that I have two Sega arcade cabinets right next to each other in my arcade, and there isn't a Sega logo to be found anywhere. If this does bother you, there are vendors who sell these logos you can add on after the fact, but I'm a big stock guy, and it's not that big of a deal to me. The marquee is beautiful, perfectly recreating the original stand-up cabinet's marquee. Well, notwithstanding the absence of the Sega logo. You will notice the lighting of the marquee is excellent, with even light distribution and no visible hotspots. This marquee uses the bigger lightbox design like on X-Men vs Street Fighter and Marvel vs Capcom, and the difference in overall quality is certainly noticeable. In short, it's bright and it's pretty. I do have one issue where it appears there are some loose wires hanging down in the light box, but Arcade1Up customer support was excellent and a replacement is on the way. One area where they did take some creative liberties was with the bezel around the screen, where the original featured a molded silver bezel. Here they went with all red and yellow. I'm not sure what instigated the change, but I don't think it looks terrible, but it does differ from the arcade for people looking for accurate recreations. The screen itself is the 17-inch BOE monitor we have all come to know and love, and again, it looks beautiful here. The screen does a great job showcasing all the vibrant colors and graphics familiar with the Sega arcade racers. For those of you looking for that more traditional CRT feel, they did include scanline options. I mean, it's not my jam, as I'm all about those sharp pixels, but if you dig it, they are here and they look pretty good, but make the screen just seem a little darker. If you look below the screen, you will notice a completely new design feature on this cab where now there's a ledge under the screen. The ledge continues the artwork from the bezel and features a map of the original OutRun track. Most people would assume that this ledge is for holding a tasty beverage while you are racing, but I would wager a bet that it was necessary to push the controls out to make them more comfortable and add stability to the cab. Finally, we reach the panel that most people will be interested in, and that is the controls. Being the first racing cab in Arcade1Up history, everybody wants to know what the wheel is like. Well, actually, it feels pretty good and has a nice weight to it and a rubbery feel. The steering seems pretty precise as well, as I am easily able to navigate my car on the courses regardless of what game, and the steering wheel has that same pull back to center that we are familiar with from the Star Wars yoke. If I was a betting man, I would say it's safe to assume that the steering wheel itself is a takeoff of the Star Wars yoke. One thing I know people will be disappointed by is that the steering wheel doesn't offer force feedback, but from what I have read, I'm sure they heard the negative feedback from this release and will offer it in their driving cabs going forward. The gear shift on the right side is where you start to see a drop in quality, as this thing feels flimsy. Sometimes I get lost in the illusion that I am playing a real arcade with Arcade1Up, but then it's the little things, like this plastic shifter that's too light, that brings me back to reality that these are toys. I mean, it works, and you can shift from low to high, and the turbo button works for turbo or outrun, but it does feel kinda junky. There are music buttons on the control panel as well that only seem to work to change the song in Outrunners. At least I think, and I really applaud Arcade1Up for including these instead of leaving that option out. Moving down the cabinet, we come to the kick plate, and usually I don't care about this section, but this is so lazy. Instead of doing separate art for the full kick plate, they only reused the art from the small kick plate panel on the sit-down version and left the majority of it black. What's even funnier is the stand-up version includes 5 games out of the box, but yet only 4 of those games are displayed on the kick plate. Lately, Arcade1Up have been doing a trend I really like, with using the riser as an extension of the cabinet itself. Here they go in a different direction, and I actually really appreciate it. While the art on the riser might be completely different, it's actually the art from the sit-down version of OutRun in the arcades, and I think that is such a cool touch. This may be the most important riser I have ever reviewed, and not just because it's the 15-inch riser like Star Wars, but because it's the first one to feature controls. There is an opening on the bottom of the riser where you will find a plate with pedals for gas and brake. As has been reported over and over, the pedals from the sit-down version aren't exactly the best and feel kind of flimsy, and sadly it's the exact same parts used here. A disclaimer, for your benefit, I did put on a pair of socks before filming this footage, so you are welcome. The pedals do feel junky, and I wish they had used something a little more rigid, but they work great. So far, absolutely zero complaints on use, as I am able to speed up with precision, and brake seems to work if I ever chose to use it. From top to bottom, this is a very impressive build from Arcade1Up that does the original cabinet justice, recreating it for the 3/4 scale, and brings some impressive innovation in terms of control and design that makes this cabinet work so well. But that is only half the story, and if the games don't play well, all the rest will fall flat. So let's take a look at the included games and find out how they perform on this cabinet. Arcade1Up's first racing cabinet is based on arcade royalty, with the marquee game being Sega's OutRun. Next to pole position, this may be the most iconic classic racing game and a great choice to be the first racer. The cabinet comes included with 5 games out of the box and not 4 like the sit-down version where you had to do an update to add the 5th. While most people probably think they chose OutRun as the first racer because the games were simpler to emulate, that isn't necessarily the case, as there are some pretty impressive graphical feats happening in these games, and you can tell it's pushing Arcade1Up's chipset to the limit with the jet engine fan taking off from inside the cabinet. This cabinet includes 5 iconic Sega racing games: OutRun, Turbo OutRun, Outrunners, Power Drift, and Rad Rally. All 5 games include options to adjust the difficulty if you find it too hard, and trust me, most people will, and other stuff like scanlines like I mentioned earlier. OutRun runs great just like you remember it, with the iconic splash wave blaring through the speakers. What's that you say? There are other tracks to play while racing? I mean, who cares? Nothing's better than splash wave. Some people will be upset as the game has changed and apparently the car isn't the exact same car from the original ROM because of licensing. I don't have that in the arcade experience with this game, so I don't even notice it, but I get how it would bother purists. The game plays well, but it will kick your ass. It isn't easy, and you almost need a perfect run just to make it to the first checkpoint. It's fun, but super hard. Turbo OutRun is a sequel in the truest meaning of the word to the original OutRun by building on the original while not making it feel too much like a different game. They have added a turbo feature which will boost your speed for a short period of time and checkpoints that allow you to continue from, which makes the game much easier to complete. Between levels you can even select improvements to your vehicle to boost the turbo or improve handling. I love this game. Outrunners brings back the original's difficulty with a massive boost in graphics and some changes to the way the car controls. This game reminds me more of the Saturn days of Sega, from the impressive visuals with the ridiculous screen mapping, having stuff just appear out of nowhere, and the zany characters you race with are really reeking of that 90s vibe. I really dig this game. Power Drift is a fun kart-style game that is super enjoyable, but suffers from some weird graphical mapping that sometimes can make it hard to control. With a little work on the controls and some memorization of the tracks, you can quickly overcome this and have a blast. Last but not least is Rad Rally, and this really isn't my favorite game on the cabinet. It's such a stark contrast between the other arcade racers and feels a bit too sensitive, almost more like a driving sim. Once you start to get used to the controls, you can overcome some of these issues and really enjoy the cool atmosphere and effects these tracks provide. Well, I did provide you with a brief overview of the games. What I'd like to do now is show you a little extended gameplay from each of the games so you can get a better feel for how they perform. So guys, that's my look at the stand-up version of Arcade1Up's first racing cab, OutRun. Overall, I'm very impressed with the design, artwork, cabinet performance, and of course, how well all the games play. This cabinet isn't perfect though, as Arcade1Up cheaped out on certain control components, like the gear shift on the control panel, and even more concerning, the gas and brake pedals, leaving me very concerned about the longevity of this product and hesitant to let my daughter run wild on it. Despite those issues, I've been having an absolute blast with the cabinet and very happy I added it to my Genie-cade. Guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think of the stand-up version of OutRun? Is this the arcade racer you guys have been waiting for, or are you hoping they release something else later on down the line? Thank you so very much for watching, guys. This is Michael B. the Game Genie, and I'll talk to you next time.